saying that the greater freedom we have, also the greater responsibility that comes along with that, the exercise of that freedom. Okay, so and then we try to understand the dynamics in relation to our personal experience, but also we try to see and understand freedom and responsibility in relation to our social realities, something that goes beyond our human experience. And we talked about structures. And then we said that it may be important that when we understand freedom and responsibility, we do understand it differently from the way liberalism, the story, the grand narrative that we actually tried to trace. And this is a bit different from how we want to understand freedom and responsibility as far as our biblical Judeo-Christian tradition is concerned. Okay? And so now we will expound briefly on this. I'll just go over it, and then we'll see if you have some questions or important items to be discussed. The first biblical note that we can draw out from the Bible is that human freedom is a fundamental and unique gift of God to humanity. Okay, uh, this belongs to the very uh, reality of our humanity and of our being. Among God's creatures, okay, at least in the world, we are the only one that has been gifted with freedom. Okay, all the others somehow experience a certain degree of determinism and somehow uh, basically conditioned uh, by they are actually uh, not they don't have any exercise of moral freedom for that matter. Okay, and this gift is something that humanity has always enjoyed right from the very beginning, according to God's own design and purpose. That even God Himself will never take it away from us, especially when even during those moments when we were not responsible in the exercise of our freedom. Okay? St. Augustine would say, God created us without consulting us. Okay? But He will never be able to save us without getting our free response to His fundamental invitation in our lives. So, in the loving relationship, you would rather be loved in freedom rather than, okay, beloved without freedom. And that would not be authentic loving if it is not coming along with freedom. Okay? Kaya nga, like even the whole idea about God, knowing that humanity may actually be irresponsible in the exercise of his freedom, knowing in anticipation that humanity will fall into sin, knowing that humanity will actually be disgraced, okay? God could have prevented that from taking away from us our freedom, but he never did that, precisely because that is something that is fundamentally part of his design about our fundamental nature as human persons. Okay? So that is one biblical emphasis that is given to freedom. Second, just as we experience freedom in a most fundamental way, especially in terms of our capacity to choose, okay, freely what is good, okay, that can actually lead us to the fullest potential of our humanity, okay, fulfillment of our humanity. There is also a certain limits to freedom. Human freedom biblically is never absolute, okay? But it is always limited, okay, in its exercise in consideration of several things. Okay, human freedom in a way is something that is limited precisely as we said earlier by the rights for the others to exercise their own freedom. Okay, so it is always in consideration with our fundamental relationship, okay, with people around us. It is also somehow limited in a way by certain laws in our lives, okay, that lead us to the fullness of our potentials. Laws we will study next meeting after the exam are there to be able to guide us on how to precisely exercise responsibly our freedom. But and therefore, uh, the exercise of freedom has to conform to such, and somehow that is that these are the moral limits to our exercise of human freedom. Okay, so which means when you choose, you can choose what is really good. Okay, and that when you're able to do that, you're actually making a real free exercise of your will. But you can also choose what is bad because you have a distorted way of appreciating the end of the will. And when you pursue that, you actually are devoid of your own potentials, devoid of your exercise of freedom. That is the paradox. Actually, because you get misled and that you are not very free to pursue what is really good because you got misguided, you were misguided, etc. You didn't have the proper information and data that the mind is able, should have been able uh, to give you, to give the will to decide on. Okay, because the mind does not have the wisdom that it should have actually. So it's limited according to the Bible. So even, for example, God would tell Adam and Eve, okay, these are all for you. Okay, you can give names to everything in paradise, in the Garden of Eden, but there is a limit. You cannot touch on this tree
Alive,
of life. Okay,
kicking,
so there is an
alive
expression.
and kicking.
There is a limit. Okay, so there are certain laws that would come along with it. Okay, fundamentally, there are philosophers who actually have been able to expound on this. Of course, liberalism, especially in modernity, has highlighted human freedom and liberty in the most fundamental way, to some extent, even absolutize this. But there are philosophers like Emmanuel Levinas who would say that there is something that is fundamentally already implanted in our human spirit, okay? And that is the fundamental obligation that we all should follow. And he calls that ur responsibility. When you say ur, that is the original responsibility. And according to Levinas, okay, even before we experience our full autonomy and freedom, we are already somehow obligated fundamentally to be responsible for the other. Okay, do you understand that? And that already, in a way, in our particular reality, you already have a manifestation of the presence of certain limits of your freedom because your freedom comes along with a fundamental original obligation or responsibility, especially in relation to others. Do you understand that? That's a very Levinasian perspective, and that, well, of course, Levinas is a Jew, okay, and he has really gone into the rabbinic studies, and he is very much familiar with the Bible, especially the Old Testament, of course, okay, and his own reflections. Of course, you have to, divide the philosophical studies of Levinas from his rabbinical studies, but sometimes they cross over, and it is in this particular way that he speaks about poor responsibility that he is able to draw out from the basic ontological structure of the human person. Okay? So that ur responsibility, that fundamental obligation comes precisely from the divine command. And that is what limits our exercise of freedom. You can never say, I just want to do whatever I like, okay, in any circumstance. No, because you are bound by law, okay, by the divine command, okay, to pursue what you are called to be as a human person. Of course, that presupposes metaphysics, okay, in understanding who you are as a person, okay? And that presupposition is what would make us assume that there are limits to the exercise of freedom. And the limits is actually morality. Morality puts limits to your exercise of your own freedom. Okay? The third point actually is the constraints to human freedom happen precisely because of our human sinfulness. We are not able to exercise our freedom biblically, okay, in pursuit of what is good, okay, in pursuit of what is right, okay. Teka muna, yung pusa ko ginalaw to. Okay. Okay. Uh, in pursuit of what is right because precisely of our own sinfulness and woundedness as a person. Had we been created without sin, we could have been very free. And then, but the fact that we have already been wounded, and our own woundedness and our own sinfulness is what actually blocks the possibility of our choices in freedom. We get distorted view of reality. Okay, sometimes we mistake the end of the will. Kala natin it's good, but it's not, etc. And that becomes a problem. And sometimes, even for some people, uh, they would see the good in the evil, and that becomes very problematic. Okay, so our constraint to human freedom is because we have been wounded by human sinfulness as a result of the original sin that we have. Fourth point, biblically, okay, that we would see that God defends freedom, not only personal freedom, okay, but freedom of peoples, of humanity, of groups of people in pursuit of their collective dreams as a people, like like in the case of the people of Israel who were enslaved in Egypt, and through Moses, God intervened and liberated them from their slavery. Okay? So the personal freedom actually could be best exercised when there is also structural conditions for the possibility of the exercise of personal freedom. Do you understand? Because, for example, you claim that you are free, but you are thrown within a context when there is dictatorship, when there is, cannot if pursue what you really want as good, then that, in a way, becomes problematic. So it is a kind of a limit that does not conform to the divine purpose and plan, so that becomes problematic. So God, in a way, would make occasions and give conditions or possibilities for people to exercise their freedom within the social context to which they are thrown. Okay? So you can see the liberating action of God in humanity in so many different episodes. Okay? When man fall into sin, there was immediately a promise. In the proto-evangelion in Genesis, it already speaks about God's plan of redeeming humanity. Sin will not prevail, but it is God's grace eventually will prevail over human realities and conditions. That's why, right from the very beginning, God already promised that the serpent will actually be destroyed. Okay? There will be enmity between you and the woman, between her offspring and yours. Okay? And then the offspring will crush the, the head of the serpent with his heel. Okay? That's why you'd see, for example, uh, the image, okay, of the serpent being crushed in its head. Okay? And that's part of the biblical vision, okay, of the triumph of good over evil, so that man and woman will really be able to exercise, okay, authentically their freedom to pursue what is best for them, to pursue their full potential according to God's own purpose and plan. Is that clear to you? Do you have any question? Okay. So in theology, this dimension of uh, freedom that is responsible structurally, because we said earlier last meeting, for example, that Adam Smith, in a way, put forward liberal capitalism as a way to let people exercise their freedom in the economic sphere. But we also realize that with the way capitalism evolved in history, we saw that it actually only gave freedom to those who have money, those who have power, but it actually disenfranchised so many people in society who are left with nothing to be able to even exercise their freedom to pursue their humanity. Okay? And so, theologically, another system that we already talked about, liberation theology, became part of the vision of allowing faith becomes transformative of the social conditions so that people may be able to experience greater freedom to pursue their humanity and the best of what they could be as human beings. Do you understand? And that is what we find in liberation theology and liberation ethics. Okay? So even we see that liberation theology and ethics is starting from its fundamental critique of liberal capitalism, initially inspired by the Marxist critique of capitalism coming from Karl Marx, no, especially with his Das Kapital. Okay, it's a very scientific critique of liberal capitalism. Okay, we see that that became the starting point in liberation theological project in Latin America using the social critical analysis of Marxism. Okay, and eventually made use of that within the framework of class struggle. Okay, and the idea of transforming social realities and systems to be able to set people free from their oppression, from their slavery. Okay, so that's actually a concrete project of this own vision of what God wanted humanity to pursue. Clear? So that's how it is. So human experience of unfreedoms and injustices has given way precisely to a new event, okay, that happened in Exodus, that people have to be set free from their conditions of slavery due to ethnicity, Jew ka, kaya pinapatay ka, due to color, American blacks, etc., African, Afro-American, due to class, because you're poor, so you're taken advantage of, okay, because you're women, okay, your gender issues, okay, of patriarchy, those have to be resolved and have to give way to the experience of authentic freedom so that every human being should be able to pursue what God wants him or her to be. and that is to reach the fullness of his potentials as a human person. Self-determined human beings, okay, but guided by the divine plan, divine purpose, and divine command. Is that clear? Any question? So that's it. And part of that, okay, we are all called to participate in pursuing human freedom for every individual. Okay, and SBST would like to speak of our doing our way of theology by going to and come from the margins with the vision of setting people free to explore their full possibilities as human persons. Is that clear? If we are done with that, do you have any question?
Father,
Then we will. Yes,
Al.
Al, go ahead.
Father, I'm just wondering, just clarification.
Go ahead.
In the case of Judas Iscariot, he, was
Yes,
he violated a human freedom
precisely.
because he
That's what I was
committed?
saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
That's
what I
I.
was saying earlier. Biblically, okay, God, at least metaphysically, in our theodicy, okay, study of God, we could see that God, who is coming from eternity, for God is not conditioned by time. And
Yeah,
therefore, from eternity, he could already see the past, present, and future. Judas Iscariot would actually fall. Okay, would actually betray Jesus.
yeah,
But he would not come in to stop him and remove his exercise of freedom just because he doesn't want things to happen the way they did. Okay, that's our point.
mm,
Because that was a free exercise of freedom on the part of Judas Iscariot. Saint Augustine
yeah,
actually would have something beautiful to say about, for example, the fall of humanity, of Adam and Eve. And he said he considers that a happy fall. Why? Because according to Saint Augustine, had not our parents fell into sin and has marked humanity with its own woundedness because of original sin, God would not have sent his son Jesus, okay, to be able to be our redeemer and take part in our humanity. So that reality, okay, of human frailty, of human vulnerability and sinfulness has given rise to God's own redemptive action in our lives by sending his son Jesus to us. And for Augustine, that had been occasioned by the fact that humanity fell to sin in the very first place and has inflicted original sin to all uh, human beings that will have to be born in this world, with the exception, of course, of Mama Mary and of Jesus, okay, and of John the Baptist before he was born, but he was conceived with sin. Okay, do you understand that? Can you follow that?
yeah. Father, another thing.
What?
Sorry,
Yes.
Father, I'm just confused. You know, people saying they don't experience poverty but misery. So I'm not saying who gonna be blamed that. Is that the
Okay.
person? Yeah, something like that. You know. So I just
Okay.
wondering the freedom there where God was given to someone, but to still experience, you know,
Yeah.
a
The point is,
yeah,
biblically, when there is a presence of poverty, that is a
yeah,
manifestation of an injustice.
yeah,
It is not something that God has designed right from the very beginning,
yeah.
but that is a result of the exercise of freedom of individuals or collective groups that have become responsible for putting up structures of injustices. Ang tawag nila ni John Paul II is structure of sin, structures of
Mm-mm.
sin in society. Okay? So our the fact that we have become poor, there is we call Leonard Boff refers to that as circumstantial poverty. Circumstantial poverty is always the result of unjust system,
Mm-mm.
okay, as a result of structures of sin, okay, and that is the reason why uh, uh, the structures of sin actually uh, is a product of human greed, human sinfulness, okay, of human uh, desire to dominate others, okay, and that therefore uh, the solution to this greed, to power and wealth, the solution to that is poverty of spirit. Okay, you have to embrace poverty, which is evangelical and not anymore circumstantial. It is not anymore something that people are thrown into, but it is something, a choice that we make to be able to be a cure to the greed of, for power and wealth. So that's what Jesus did. He embraced poverty. Okay, and everyone who would like to participate in the liberation of humanity will have to more or less uh, somehow take on the same path. Okay, that eventually will enable you to become an instrument or an agent of liberation. Is that clear? So
Yeah, thank you, Father.
there are a lot of paradoxes in our Christian theology. Okay, are there more questions? If there are none, because we don't have enough time.
Father,
Yes,
Father, sorry, James
go
here.
ahead.
I have a question. So, Father, in the scripture, it is in the book of Isaiah, it is said that before we were born in our mother's womb, God has already known us by name, by anything we'll
Yes,
do. Father, the irony about, for example, when you look to some of the most notorious murderers or some of the most people who do very, very bad things, the thing is, Father, because if we say that God makes us, then there's something in goodness in us that is touched by God. So, Father, the thing is, of course, what a person does is his own freedom. It is his own free will
yes,
to do that. The thing is it also fair to say that God allows it to happen, knowing that God he created us and He knows that is going to happen to us in our life. So, is it also fair to say that God allows these things to happen?
yes, precisely. God allows these things to happen precisely because He cannot violate, you know, people's exercise of freedom, as I said earlier, as the first biblical point. Okay, that God would always respect the original vision that He has for for humanity to be free, to do what uh, to exercise His freedom. But of course, in the exercise of freedom, God gives him guides to do that. But in the event that humanity would not want to follow the guides and pursues his own way, leading him to perdition, God will never just stop him and remove his freedom from him. No, because God has fashioned humanity precisely as a free, ontologically free individuals. Okay, and God wants him to make choices for the good, not because he is determined to choose what is good. No, he actually has freedom to choose what is the good. Okay, and that he could actually decide not to choose what is good. Okay, as an exercise of freedom. But when he does that, he violates fundamentally his own vision or God's own vision for him to pursue his best potentials as a human person. Okay? So if you want to get lost in freedom, God can never stop you. Sabi nga ni St. Augustine, you have to have your own yes, your fiat before God can actually even do the bests in your life. And that is something that we will try to understand in the next session about the tension between human weaknesses and human sinfulness and God's graciousness. How does that operate? Would that mean when God makes available His grace, does that destroy human freedom? We will try to study that. Okay, I think we should go now to the next session because that will be answered. Okay, in the next session. Okay, let me share again another slide here.